are on live, ma'am. Hello everyone. Welcome to our tutorial, online theatre tutorial. As you know, organized by Rishra Durayan, we started online theatre tutorial from last year with many eminent theatre personalities of Indian theatre. They took classes by Facebook Live, and we did discussion about theatre. This year we are starting online theatre tutorial from today with Madam Jill. Welcome, ma'am. Vanakkam.
Vanakkam, yes. Thank you, Nadri.
Good evening.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you for the invitation to take part. I'm very happy to be with you on StreamYard.
Yes. Ma'am, Jill, she grew up in New York, but last 31 years she lives in India, in Tamil Nadu. She director, founder of Orville Theatre Group. Might everyone know what is Orville? Orville is a city, and great city, experimental city, which is made by vision of Rishi Aurobindo Ghosh. In that Orville, ma'am is doing theatre since 1990, and she also used to direct in New York, USA, Thailand, and India. So she has a long experience, long journey in theatre. It is good for us to learn. So we try to find out from her about a scenario of Western theatre and Eastern theatre as well. So yes, ma'am. So let's start. For this discussion, our moderator is Subhankar. Welcome, Subhankar. He is my friend. He completed his master's degree from Rabindra Bharati University in acting. He is our moderator for this show. So let's start following the topics, please.
Thank you. Deep already has described Orville. Let me just give you a small introduction. Orville is not just merely a theatre group, but they are a community of bunch of brilliant minds, and there are people from different parts of the world coming together and create something new. And Jill Navarre is a part of that. So, what I wanted to ask you, ma'am, is what motivated you to come to India, and how did you bridge the gap between this Western and Eastern culture, and how it helps you to be, how it developed the artist in you?
Okay, that's a multi question.
It is.
Yeah, my journey to India started in 1987 when I was traveling with a friend of mine, and he had been to India before, and after some discussion, we were living, both of us, in Washington, D.C., in the capital, the U.S. capital. I was doing theater there, and I wanted to take a break to do some traveling. So if I remember correctly, because it's a long time ago, we decided he was going to be doing some archaeological work in Iraq, and I was going to meet him in Delhi after his dig was over, and then we would travel. So that's what we did. I went to Delhi in Christmas, around Christmas time. I had already some friends there who I had met in Washington, some Indian friends. So I was able to stay in Delhi. And then when my friend John arrived from Iraq, we both traveled south from Delhi. And actually, my friend John knew more about Orville than I did. At that time, for me, it was just a place in the guidebook. It was not anything special. But he had met someone who grew up here, actually a young Tibetan boy, and he was very curious to visit Orville. So when we stopped in Pondicherry, at that time quite a smaller city than it is now, we decided to take our bicycles and wander by bicycle up the road to Orville and ride around and see what exactly what the place was. So that was my first connection. I had in my travel. I mean, it's such a long story. I don't know. I'm trying to condense it
Of course, yes.
because, yeah, the first time you come to a place, you have so many memories of it. It was a wonderful first meeting for me. It was a horrible first meeting for me. I can remember, of course, 1987. There was, for me, a lot of culture shock coming from the US, always growing up in big cities, and then having to navigate Indian roads, Indian traffic, Indian transport. Hi, Jazzy. but luckily, I'm a very stubborn person, and the more I'm faced with challenges, the more I respond to challenges. So I was determined to travel and to face the difficulties because there were many at that time as a traveler in India. But somehow the place of Orville, when we visited, it stayed with me. Just I had a casual meeting with some people on the road. I asked, of course, is anybody here doing theater? It's my usual question when I visit a new place. You know, where's my tribe? Where's my family? So I was introduced to some people who had an improv group here. And those were the first people I met. And when I left to continue my travel in India, I told the people I had met here that I would keep in touch with them. And 1987 was just before or just after, I think, the economic opening of the country. I think just after, if my memory serves me correct. So it was a great adventure to travel by bus, by train in 1987 across India, down from Delhi all the way to Pondicherry, and then over to Kerala. And something about the people I met and the experience for me was delightful and curious. I was very curious because, I mean, at that time in America, what people knew, there were two things people in the US knew about India. It was dirty and there were poor people there. That was it. So whenever I told my friends, yeah, I'm going to India, they said, well, where are you going? You know, why do you want to go there? You know, it's dirty and there are poor people there. So, of course, that view of India has changed enormously over the years. There's a very active, healthy, vigorous Indian community in the U.S., but at that time, not so many. So our understanding of India was so limited. I mean, limited because of we didn't have a chance to meet many Indians. And because in the US, our worldview is very small. I can still say that, actually. In the US, many Americans have never traveled outside of the US. And so they have only secondhand an appreciation of different cultures, different languages, different points of view. So something about Orville stayed with me from my experience, and I was determined to come back. And eventually, to make a long story short, eventually I came back in 1990 with a proper invitation, which allowed me to get what is called an entry visa, a proper invitation from Orville. And that was started my journey of life here. So I could go on, but you know.
Please go on. Please.
It's 30 years of my life. So it can't be condensed in a few words.
Please go on. We want to learn from you as much as we can.
Well, I mean, the experience of traveling, you have to be open to the adventure, number one. I know that recently many Indian young people have taken on the road and left home and taken this adventure. It requires a large amount of courage and stubbornness, I would say, to not be discouraged, because the anticipation of what you will meet and the actual meeting can be very different sometimes. You know, you always hope for the best, but sometimes you are faced with the worst. And that can really shake you spiritually and physically sometimes also. I can remember being in Kandy over New Year's Eve and crying because I had amoebic dysentery. I was in the bathroom and I was crying because I was feeling sorry for myself. I said, my friends in America, they're celebrating New Year's Eve and having fun, and here I am sitting on the toilet feeling horrible. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges to face when you are traveling, but somehow the spirit of India, I felt, you know, it was very funny. I told my friends, I feel like I'm coming home when I came to India. And when I expressed that feeling in Orville, when I went to finally stay here, and I introduced myself and I spoke to what we call the entry group. They interviewed me and tried to find out who I was. And I said the same thing to them. I said, my feeling was, so maybe you can understand what that means. I felt a spiritual connection to India that I had never experienced in my other travels. And I had already been in my travels to Europe. I lived in Canada for 3 years. But somehow traveling to Europe is like traveling as a visitor, you know, as a tourist, let's say, as a tourist. And as a tourist, of course, I'd always dreamed of visiting France and England and, you know, these places that you learn about in school. But in India, I felt again as if I were coming home. And I don't know how to explain that. There's no explanation. It's just a feeling you have in your heart.
So how did the first production came in place? How did it happen? The first production, your first direction in India, your first work in India.
The first time I worked in India was in Orville, and I brought with me a play that I had written called Mommy, I'm Home. And I was traveling with a friend of mine who was a dancer and a choreographer, and she and I decided to offer this play to Orville. And I worked with the Orville musicians and one actor, I think, an actor and a musician, and presented it in the amphitheater in Orville that was at that time being used for high school students. And it was very nice because Orville, as you may know, is an international community of people from all over the world.
Was Orville already famous?
Famous? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know. Many people don't know about Orville, even in India. So there were at that time about 900 people. Now there is over 3,000, maybe 3,500, something like that. Not such a big increase, but I think the reach of what Orville stands for has increased. Hi, Zahid. Greetings from Bangladesh, man. So the reach of what Orville, the potential of Orville, I think has increased because of social media, of course, and because of our outreach. It's best that they don't know, Jasmine. You have to explain yourself. What does that mean? Jasmine, by the way, is a friend of mine, Jasmine Aulat, who is from Chandigarh, a great musician and singer. And she's joining us, so I'm getting a little chat messages from Jasmine. So now I forgot what I was saying. Orville, I don't know. We don't want to be famous, actually. We want to do good. And if we are known for the things that we manage to do well, like planting trees, like sustainable development, like village action, outreach, like theater, then we are happy that we have made some difference here. You know, because many of us are foreigners. I think 2/3 of Orville are Indian origin, and 1/3 is foreign. So as foreign nationals in Orville, we have many challenges, you know, culturally and so forth. But we feel also, I feel so very welcome when I'm here. And the first 5 years, of course, was very challenging. You're constantly faced with, well, two physical things, either stomach problems or skin problems. It was back and forth for 5 years. You know, stomach problems, skin problems, stomach problems, skin problems. So after 5 years, I was finally acclimated to the climate and the food and the water, and then my body could kind of settle down. It's quite an adjustment, actually, but again, I'm very stubborn, so I took it as a challenge. And then to make a difference, I wanted to start a theater group that reflected the ideals of Orville. So the ideals of Orville, unity and diversity, the concept of oneness amongst diversity. And to me, an international theater group can reflect that very well, because we all have something to learn from each other across cultures, across language, across artistry. And for me, the theater group is actually an extension of the ideals of Orville. And I try to embody what Orville can be in the group. So the Orville Theater Group strives to be a unity in diversity and to create an atmosphere of sharing, of love, because without love, no art is possible. And we are not commercially oriented, let's say. We are not in it for the money, although I understand the need to be financially secure. Luckily, I'm supported by Orville, so I don't have to worry so much about my own financial situation. And I'm able to extend an invitation to many young people to come and work with us, both inside India and from outside as well. So this mixture, for me, of people from all over the world is very exciting. I think as a young person, I grew up in New York. So New York is already an international city. And I always knew people from different places. You know, it's not a homogeneous population. It's a population of different cultures, different languages, different foods. So I was already feeling very comfortable with this international aspect of living. And I suppose I can say that as a theater artist, one of my goals is to create theater that is cross-cultural, interdisciplinary. So we include music and dance in our plays always, art forms, visual elements. And I try to keep up, of course, with the latest in what's happening outside, because sometimes you can get very isolated here in our little corner of Tamil Nadu. Hi, Gaurav. Greetings from Santoshpur, Anuchintan. Wow, that's a mouthful.
I wanted to ask you that your second play was Waiting for Godot, right?
Yes, very good.
And,
wow,
and I just wanted
did some homework.
I just wanted to know that actor drama was not quite popular in India, so it was not. So why did you choose this play, and how was the reception at that time?
Why did I choose Waiting for Godot? Hi, Indrajit. Namaskar. It's a monster play, but it's one of the most beautiful plays as a director that you can ever work on. So I am very selfish in that regard. I don't choose plays unless I feel that I will learn something from the experience. I don't like to take on a work unless I can say to myself as a director, how the hell am I going to do that? If I have a question in my mind, but how am I going to do this play? Then I know this is a good idea. Then I know I'm going in the right direction. Because why do something that you already know? So when I chose Waiting for Godot, I said to myself, 4 people and a tree. Okay, well, what are we going to do with this? And but when you read Waiting for Godot, you have no idea what it's going to be when you start working on it. And then you realize how enormously the challenges are, because you have so many choices in how you can interpret every line that Vladimir and Estragon say. And depending on the choices that you make, the play can go in multiple directions. So it's a monster play. And, I chose it for that reason, because I didn't know how I was going to do it.
And how was the reception? Was the reception good?
Well, it was Orville. There was an Orville audience. We have an auditorium called Sherburne Auditorium. And it was pretty full, if I remember correctly. And many people in the audience, of course, were familiar with the play, because the largest foreign group in Orville is French. And of course, Beckett was living in France and was often writing in French, although he was originally from Ireland. So many people were familiar with the play. And because of the existential nature of the question which the play presents, I think it was a good fit for Orville. because Orville is very often faced with existential questions, questions of self-understanding. Oh yeah, man, I loved Waiting for Godot. Gaurav, thank you for this comment. He asks, what do you, ma'am, about the status of theater of the absurd in India? Oh my God. How should Indian directors approach Ionesco, Adamov, or Beckett? Adamov, I'm sorry, I don't know. Ionesco, I admire greatly and loved from my teenage years. Actually, seeing The Chairs by Ionesco was one of the reasons I got into theater. So I was hooked at a very early age on theater through Ionesco. There's something about growing up in a challenging time of life, and always your early 20s are challenging, that is reflected in your choice of the literature or the music or the artwork or the dance form that you admire, because it responds to something inside you. So, Gaurav, I would love to know more about the theater of the absurd in India. I can't say that I know very much about it. I don't, in my little connections to my theater friends in Bangalore or Mumbai or Chennai or Delhi, I don't recall hearing very much about Ionesco or Beckett, but I am sure that if it were done, there would be something in the Indian soul that would respond to it. But I would love to hear your take on it. So maybe we can, at some point, according to the people who are running this live thing, we can hear from you. That would be great. I would love to know more.
You have also done Tagore's Sacrifice. Can you tell us something about that as well? You have only done one Tagore play, right?
Only one Tagore play, yes. And I had a choice. I was thinking of Post Office, but finally there was something about Sacrifice that touched me. And of course, the larger theme in Sacrifice is the state versus the religion, and who has the right to dictate to people. Is the state the authority, or is religion the authority? And of course, is an ongoing topic in India, maybe a little more so than in some other countries. So I was touched actually by the story of this young goat herding girl whose favorite goat is taken for sacrifice. And she goes to the king and begs the king for mercy for her pet goat. And the king is so touched by her tears that he has a change of heart. And this wonderful moment of change of heart, of awakening, let's say, of an inner awakening, of course, where it corresponded to something of Orville in me, because we are in Orville to change, to be changed by Sri Aurobindo and the mother. I have to put the mother there also because you guys only are referring to Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, but his spiritual partner was the mother, also known as Mira Alfassa from France. So this opportunity in Orville to start your life over, to make a change from the inside and have that change reflected on the outside, was the theme, I think, of Sacrifice. How the pity that was shown by the king to this young girl, because she was pure of heart. And there are many great stories about someone who is pure of heart making a big difference in the world. Joan of Arc comes to my mind immediately. Buddha, Jesus, all these great spiritual leaders were, you can say, had a certain innocence, a certain purity that changed people. Because how can you not respond to that? How can you close your heart to the tears of a young girl? So the king has a major shift of understanding. And he says, from now on, there will be no blood sacrifice in my kingdom. And there will be no sacrifice to Kali anymore. And so, of course, immediately he meets opposition from the priest of the temple. And the priest of the temple says, you have no right to tell us that we can no longer do what we want. And so there is this great conflict between the king and the priest. And it's a beautiful play. And the topic is very, very understandable. And I think reaches beyond. So these are the kind of plays that I like to do. The ones that go beyond the mundane and reach into answering these kind of eternal questions that that you have to answer from your own heart eventually. So that was sort of the reason that, and also the writing was gorgeous. You know, Tagore's, even though it was, of course, a translation from the Bengali. Hi, Arnav. Would like to hear something about diasporic influence, which you notice in theater, especially when you work in India. I don't know exactly what that means. So maybe when we have a chance to hear from you, Arnav, you can explain to me a little bit more what that means to you. Writing from outside India, from Indian writers. I don't know many. I actually have to say, I don't know many Indian writers from outside India. I know more who are inside India. So
you have done Sannyasi as well. Sannyasi,
what?
if I'm not wrong. Sannyasi, you have done a play. You have done a play, Sannyasi.
No, not a play. It was originally a novel that my partner and I adapted into the form of a screenplay.
Okay.
Hi, Swapan. The screenplay was an adaptation of a novel that was called Sannyasi, or By the Body of the Earth. The Body of the Earth is a quote from the Upanishads. So it was written as a novel by a follower of the mother in Sri Aurobindo, who lived in the ashram. And it was that novel that we adapted into a screenplay called Sannyasi. And we haven't yet filmed it. We haven't yet found a producer. We would love to find a producer. We would love to find a producer.
Maybe you can.
Yeah. It's film. I love film. I love cinema. I mean, I'm an American. I'm in love with the movies. But when you are on the other side, when you're trying to find someone to give you the money to do film, which you think is important, it's very difficult. And my first love is theater, I have to say. My first love is theater. And somehow, I think, my grandfather was, no, not grandfather, my great-grandfather in Russia was a traveling musician. And that meant that he had a little group, and they would travel from town to town, village to village, and they would make up songs and stories on the spot, depending on the local story of the week. And they would sing and they would perform, and they traveled like that. So maybe and my father was a painter. So maybe, I put together painting and music, and I get theater in my genes. So it's in my blood. But I started off in theater as a playwright. And only much later I got into directing. That's another
Yes,
story.
I was coming to
Yeah, yeah.
that. You have been writing since 9 years of age, and can you tell us about that? About how you approach, how you pick the subject? You have mentioned in your website, and those who are watching, I would ask them to visit the Orville website as well. You will find everything about her ideas. But
Yeah,
I want to, yes, please, please.
and also because this time on live is so short, if people want to continue a discussion, I would be happy to hear from everybody on my Facebook page or on WhatsApp. So please feel free to contact me. I'm very available because we have little time on this platform, and I could speak until my voice gives out. So because I've lived a long time, I'm 74 years old, so I have a lot to say about my 74 years. So my writing, I was originally for 10 years I was a poet, and my first love was poetry. I was writing and getting published, and writing in America, and also where I lived in Canada for 3 years. Then I came back to America, and I continued writing, and started with some friends of mine. We started a little coffee house where writers could come and read their poetry. So my first love was poetry, which I began, I think, when I was about 17, which is probably the age a lot of people start writing poetry. Hi, Subhajeet. Nice to see you too, man. And yeah, I love especially the French symbolist poets. Um, uh, what do you call it? They were the ones that touched me most. 19th century symbolist poets like Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Mallarmé. Um, if you have not read, as theater artists, um, we have to know or be touched by or use the other art forms. So I would always urge theater people to not get very narrow in their vision of what is interesting or useful in your art. Um, Theater, music, dance, art galleries, visual arts, plastic arts, poetry. I'm sure many people in theater, because it's India and you have such great, great poets, um, know what I'm talking about. That you can be inspired by all of the art forms, and you should be by inspiration. So, in my early days, starting at 17 years old, I was writing poetry and very much influenced by Arthur Rimbaud, Charles Baudelaire, Stéphane Mallarmé, Paul Verlaine, and American poets, of course, Hart Crane, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and of course, British poets. We were forced, of course, in school to read first the British and then the American poets. So, yeah, poetry was always my first love. And then when I was going for my master's degree in college, just on a lark, I took a playwriting class. And then I was just hooked. That was it for me. And when I started writing plays, I couldn't write poetry anymore. It was very interesting. And I have heard this experience from someone else that I just spoke to recently, someone in my cast. He had the same experience. Somehow, for me, when I started writing plays, the poetry was over for some reason. Interesting. I don't know why.
Ma'am, how much you are inspired or your work is inspired from Tamil Nadu's culture, Tamil Nadu's folk and everything?
I'm sorry, for what?
How much your work is inspired from Tamil Nadu's local culture, Tamil Nadu's folk dance and folk singing and
Oh
their.
my. Um, I have friends who are folk artists, especially, Oroville is surrounded by 5 villages, and in these villages, especially in a couple of villages nearby, um, there are wonderful folk artists, musicians mainly, and I have collaborated with many of them. The group is called Mohanam Sound Troupe, and we have actually worked together in many plays, and we have traveled together. Mohanam Sound Troupe and I have visited and participated in a festival in Thailand. So the drummers, especially drummers that I know, musicians, vocal musicians, wind instruments, I have included, and also what else? I'm trying to think. Wind, vocal, string instruments. The local musicians, I would say, are the strongest in my connection with Tamil Nadu. And vocally, of course, in Oroville, there are some very fine singers, mostly North Indian, of course. Vocally, not so many from the South. But hi, Vinny, happy to see you all. Well, I don't see you, but welcome. So I can say I have collaborated most often with musicians from Tamil Nadu, and I hope to continue that, especially with Mohanam. Now they're in their 2nd generation of drummers. The ones that I have known have grown up, and the 2nd generation of artists are now young men and women. Also, the martial art form, Silambu, is very local, Tamil Nadu martial art form, which, and also, of course, Kalari Payat. There's a wonderful Kalari Gram, very close to Oroville. So I have been in touch with many Kalari practitioners over the years. And also, of course, our neighbor, 10 minutes away from me, Adi Shakti. Through Adi Shakti, I've gotten to know quite a bit about Tamil Nadu and also other Indian art forms, music, dance. From dance, of course, Bharatanatyam, but also some of the other Indian dance forms we have used in our plays. So, I mean, it's inevitable. I'm in India, and I am performing in the Indian context. So it is inevitable that I will be influenced, and I hope I will influence. There is an exchange of energy across cultures, and I find this kind of collaboration very rewarding. I would love it, and I would love to do more of it.
And just because we're talking about folk, I just want to know your take on this. Due to the rapid urbanization, the folk culture is not like what it used to be 50 years ago. So how are you or the folk artists right now coping with the changes? And what's the younger generation thinking about folk? And are they coming into folk?
I don't know. I don't want to be an expert on folk theater in India. It's not I'm sorry, it's not my area of expertise. I'm very sorry, but I'm from New York. My My roots are U.S. theater. I can tell you about the efforts that we have made to collaborate with many Indian artists, musicians especially, dancers, of course. Um, from Bangalore, I have several Indian dance friends, and they very often come and work with us, but not folk art, but um, modern dance um, artists. So modern dance is an art form that lends itself very well to collaboration in theater. And it is with modern dancers, contemporary dance as it's called, that I resonate more than with the folk artists. I can't claim to be a great, to have some great knowledge of folk art in Tamil Nadu, but the collaboration has to exist in a context of theater. And if the stories lend themselves to that collaboration, I'm very open to it. To working with folk artists, but I can't say that I have done extensive collaboration in that regard.
Because you are a playwright yourself, and you have done Shakespeare plays, and there are so many Shakespeare interpretations are happening all over the world right now.
Yes.
So, how do you interpret Shakespeare according to the scenario, according to the situation? How should the aspiring playwrights should approach this? What's your take on this?
Wait, let me close my window. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
It's getting a bit cool in here. First of all, I can't tell anybody what to do. So I'm not an expert. I am a researcher, just like everybody else. And I am always discovering for myself what is meaningful for me. So I cannot say what would be meaningful for you. I can say for myself that Shakespeare, for me, is the greatest, the most profound writer in English that you can work with. He touches something of the human experience that very few writers in English do. And besides, the language is gorgeous. And there is no finer language to work with in English than Shakespeare's language. And when you work with it, hi, Abisha, hi, Abisha, I'm very well, thank you. When you work with that language, that gorgeous language, you are transported. It's like a mantric language. When you work with iambic pentameter, which Sri Aurobindo himself used in his poetry, if you are familiar with Sri Aurobindo's poetry, the great epic poem that he wrote called Savitri, he used iambic pentameter as his rhythm. And this iambic pentameter, the rhythm of the heartbeat, as it's known, has a very mantric quality. And it is, on the one hand, mesmerizing, on the other hand, very freeing. And you have to have the experience of it to know what I'm talking about. So I would urge you, if you have not worked with Shakespeare before, to please have a go at it. It is something, it is a divine experience. And I have used it, I have worked with children. 9th standard kids did scenes from Romeo and Juliet in a school, a local school here called Udavi School. And they got it, man. They got Romeo and Juliet immediately. There was no problem in translation for them. They knew all about a girl and a boy from different families, different, cultures, who could not fall in love, whose love was forbidden. They didn't need any translation about the story at all, because they have grown up hearing great poetry in Tamil or in sometimes maybe in Hindi, but certainly in Tamil. And they felt very comfortable with the loftiness of the language. They were not afraid of it because no one told them to be afraid of it. So they just weren't. And they were great. We've done Romeo and Juliet on our stage also, the full play. But I said it in India. And I have to say, I think it worked pretty well. It's beautiful. It's my favorite Shakespeare play, I think.
You have also done Ibsen, and it was a musical play.
Yeah, it was a reading, a staged reading. And the story is that a friend of mine, a playwright from the US, wrote a script called Ibsen that he showed me. And he said, "Can you do this here in Oroville?" And when I read it, I was very touched by it. It was a play about the life of Ibsen, actually, about, let's say, a dark moment of the soul in Ibsen's life. And the writing was so fine. I said to my friend, I said, "This must be an opera. This should be an opera." And as it turned out, there was a composer, an Orvillian composer, a German young man living in Oroville at that time. So I put the two of them together. And it took them a couple of years because opera is it's no joke, huh? Writing. Hi, Santano. Love you too, man. So 2 years later, after back and forth between America and India and Germany and Oroville, they came up with an opera called Ibsen. And we had a staged reading of that opera here. So what we did was, not all the music had been written, but we played as much of the music as had been written up until that point. We played it for the audience to listen to, and we played it kind of in between the scenes because we were not opera singers. That's a whole different ball game, opera, you know. So we were theater people, and we loved the script, and so we acted it, and we listened to the music, but the actors still had the script in their hand. So it was kind of a trial, you know, let's do it before an audience and see what their reaction is. And I think we enjoyed that experience. And they were supposed to start rehearsal for this opera just at the moment of lockdown in March of last year, as many of us had this horrible experience of being in rehearsal or in performance. And as for me here, I was in rehearsal for a play that I had written just 2 weeks before performance, and we had to stop. Everything shut down, and yeah, that was a nightmare. So we decided to take that play and put it on Zoom. The Zoom experience. I have survived. I would like to have a T-shirt that says, "I'm a director. I have survived Zoom."
Then you are an actor yourself as well, and we all know that in America there are so many acting forms, from Stella Adler, Lee Strasberg, and so many Arta and so many other people. So, what is your approach in this? How do you approach a character? Which one do you follow any of them in particular?
Yeah, that's not just American also. So how do I begin this? there have been many that have influenced me. Hang on a second. Wait one moment. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. The reason I went away was that I wanted to show you the book. That is a sort of Bible to me, or has been a Bible to me. Jerzy Grotowski, everybody should know or knows Grotowski. And this book, Towards a Poor Theater, is a book that should be studied, and it should be on all of your bookshelves, not just on the bookshelf, but it should be read, and it's a great inspiration to me. And of course, Grotowski was influenced by Stanislavski, but managed to go beyond Stanislavski. Peter Brook is also a great influence on me. Of course, The Empty Space, the book that Peter Brook wrote, is a great inspiration. Who else? This lady, wait. Cicely Berry. This is a book called Voice and the Actor. Cicely Berry. And she's a wonderful teacher. You can also see her tutorials on YouTube. She's worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company and guided them in the use of the voice and vocal technique on stage. Who else? Peter Brook, Grotowski, Annie Bogart, of course, City Theater Company in New York. Annie Bogart's several books and her approach to theater. Michael Chekhov, a great theater teacher and actor himself, working with Stanislavski and a student of Stanislavski, but took Stanislavski in another direction. Michael Chekhov wrote a wonderful book, I think it's called, if I'm not mistaken. So these people, I would say maybe 4 or 5 of the great ones that I am most influenced by. And I have to say that in my own experience of learning, the group that I worked with just before I came to live in India was a group called Sanctuary Theater in Washington, D.C. Actually, myself and 2 other artists, we started together as a threesome, the Sanctuary Theater. And because we felt we wanted to create a multicultural, multi-ethnic theater company in Washington, in the capital. There was none at that time. And we felt that it was very much lacking. So we started a theater company. Little did we know what that meant. We just, we were very naive, fortunately. And we went in and we thought, we'll start a theater company. And we did. And it was 9 years later that I left to come to India. But in that time with the Sanctuary Theater, my 2 great friends, Michael Oliver and Elizabeth Bruce, they later became husband and wife. They were very much versed in environmental theater, theater that uses the total experience of theater, not just the stage. but the total environment, they opened up for me a new way of understanding of what the potential for theater exists beyond the conventional scenic design, you know what I mean, beyond the footlights, beyond the proscenium. And so I very often go beyond the proscenium, and I find that very liberating. And in Oroville, fortunately, we have several outdoor venues, which I have used to play The Tempest, for instance. We were outdoors. Merchant of Venice, we were outdoors. All My Sons by Arthur Miller, we were outdoors. So I find that using unconventional theater spaces, as many of my friends do, both here and abroad, can create inspiration. The space itself can inspire you. And so I would urge all of you, of course, I think most of you know that already. Most of you who know modern theater don't rely exclusively on this stage picture and have gone beyond it. But I think it's very liberating. Of course, in Oroville, we have a disadvantage in that everything is new here. We don't have a lot of old loft spaces, old factories, which can be converted into theater spaces. We don't have streets, so we don't do street theater. One time, one of my friends here, they asked him, "How come you don't do street theater in Oroville?" And he said, "Well, because we don't have streets. You know, we're still." So we don't have yet a built-up city atmosphere. It will come in our own way, of course, but Oroville is still very rural in its setting, and that has advantages and disadvantages. For the Sanctuary Theater in Washington, we rented an old church, an old Methodist church, and one of the rooms in that church had not been used for a long, long time. And we went in there, we cleaned it up, and we had our premiere performance in that Calvary United Methodist Church. But those kind of old spaces, which are very well known when you're in a big city, I suppose Bombay and Calcutta, like where Rangakami Theater is located in the old loft, which they have now recently renovated quite beautifully, I understand. Those are great spaces to work in. But in Oroville, everything is sort of new. So luckily for us, we could create a space called CRIPA, C-R-I-P-A, which is the Center for Research in the Performing Arts. And many of you who have seen our work have seen us in CRIPA. It's a wonderful rehearsal space, which I've also used quite often as a performance space. So, and the auditorium, Sherburne Auditorium as well, is a wonderful acoustically very fine space. I don't know how I got into that question.
Do you find any difference between proscenium and non-proscenium theatres according to the approach? How do you approach a proscenium and non-proscenium theatre? Are there any differences, or do you feel they're same?
Of course, no. Of course, there's a difference. Is that a real question? When you have,
so how do you approach it? That's what I wanted to know. I mean, when you're doing a proscenium theatre and when you're doing a non-proscenium theatre, how do you approach? What's the difference?
Form follows function, man. Form follows function. So when you read a play and you understand the story, you can decide what would be the best space to tell this story in. Sometimes it is proscenium. You know, sometimes you need that stage frame, that framing of the stage picture, but sometimes not. I mean, like when we did The Tempest, we did it outside because almost all the scenes in The Tempest are outdoor scenes. So why stuff it into a square box, you know? And it was beautiful outside under the stars to play The Tempest. And as luck would have it on the stage, at that moment we had a tree. We had an actual tree growing on the stage. So Ariel, when she played her scenes, actually got into the tree and played her scenes of looking out and seeing the boat, you know, which capsizes, seeing the boat from the point of view of being up in a tree. It was a lovely, lovely experience. And working outdoors at night under the stars, it's beautiful. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience. I haven't, I tried to, like today we went to the visitor center and we noticed again the place where we had performed Merchant of Venice. And the setting that we used for that play lent itself very well as a design element to tell the story. So the design has to follow the story. You know, every story will inspire you as a director. It will whisper in your ear. It will say, you know, it will tell you where it wants to be. You just have to listen.
You have been directing plays for so long. So I want to know that what's your take on light design and set design and due to well, sometimes you don't have that much financial ability. So how do you do it?
I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know how we do it. It gets done. But how we do it is always a miracle. And somehow, in each production, we have what I call angels that come to work with us. And I'm serious. I don't know how it gets done. My motto is just to keep going no matter what. So if I'm forced to use, to work on a financially limited budget, I will do that and use it as a positive, in a positive way. So, you know, this Towards a Poor Theater is not a joke. I mean, Grotowski tells you that it's towards a poor theater that we will really make a difference. And so my means, how can I say, the production values can often be accessed in what can be a very limited budget financially, but can sometimes be very beautiful. You know, more is less. And I don't very often, for instance, I don't use flats very often anymore. I used to, maybe 25 years ago, 20 years ago, I used to use a lot of flats, but I found that I didn't have the people here who could design them. And it was a bit limiting because it's very difficult to use flats as a design element unless you're on a proscenium. So when I got away from trying to limit the production to a design that doesn't move or change, it was very liberating. It's awful sometimes a challenge. For instance, when you're working outdoors, like here in Oroville, we were just discussing this today. In the penultimate scene in The Merchant of Venice, the merchant Antonio is reviewing what has happened to him. He's all by himself. It's a solo moment. And on our outdoor stage at that moment, a dog walked onto the stage. So working outside, you have to be able to incorporate the unexpected, expect the unexpected. And luckily for me, my partner Svar was able to incorporate as Antonio the dog in the scene and make it work somehow. But how I do it is to find people who can work with me on a limited budget, who can be inspired by creating an atmosphere. Like when we did Midsummer Night's Dream, we created a forest out of metal PVC pipes, and we cut inside. We put lights inside these PVC pipes, and they became a magical forest. PVC piping is not very expensive, so you have to find, working on the cheap can be very liberating, can also, of course, be very frustrating. Luckily here, costume-wise, we have a great collection of costumes, which we have accumulated over the years from all our productions, and we have found a safe home for them and people who are taking care of them. So we have 25 years of costumes safely ensconced. So I can go into the costume shop and find what I need. And we have also designers here, because we have a couple of wonderful clothing design ateliers in Oroville that have helped us and worked with us over the years. And so I am lucky in production that I have access to musicians, Oroville musicians. I have access to Oroville dancers, to costume designers, who are all very talented people who are actually in Oroville itself. So it's like a community of artists that are willing to collaborate. And I also, of course, I invite people to come from outside. For dance, quite often I have access to my friends Abhilash Ningappa in Bangalore, who has a wonderful place called Play Practice Residency, and Deepak Rangaswamy. So from Deepak and Abhilash, I'm able to get them to work with us and help us to explore movement and dance elements. Yeah, so it's wonderful to have, after all these years, some design people who I can call on to come and work with us over the years. Lighting designers, we have a lighting designer here. We have two, actually. One who I worked with for 20 years. So you can imagine, after a 20-year collaboration, we didn't have to say much to each other. I gave him the script. We sit together, we discuss the script, and then he sort of knows what to do. And so that fellow has now he's a bit older and is not doing as much design as before. So I have looked for and I found some younger lighting designers that have, one is a young French woman here now. I worked with her, and also, of course, my good friend Sukumar Shanmugam, very talented Tamil actor, director, writer, casting director, lighting designer, good friend. Sukumar, very talented, multi-talented young man who I have worked with as an actor, as a lighting designer. And so I have friends now. And with these collaborators, you can do something.
Ma'am, tell about beauty of language and depth of expression. I have read yesterday. Please.
You mean Shakespeare, or you mean language in general? Yeah, I mean, I'm stuck on it. Usually I work from a script. I know many people who prefer to work otherwise. Maybe it comes because I was a poet first. So I have a love of beautiful language. And so when I read a script, what I look for first is the facility with the fineness of expression. So the writer must have a fineness of expression that the actor can wrap his tongue or her tongue around. And for me, the great writers can do that. That's why they're great. They're great because they have found the magic of language, the beauty of language and the expression. Shakespeare, of course, but Arthur Miller, American, of course. Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, another great poet of the theater. From France, of course, great poets of the theater. So, I think of great writers as writing with an ear towards the musicality of language. You have to have an ear for the music. And as an actor, I find it sometimes, for some reason or another, it's a bit lacking. The best actors can hear the music of a language and can pick up on and interpret and dive into and ride the wave, for instance, of Shakespeare. You have to get up on that surfboard and sort of surf the iambic pentameter. And when you learn how to ride that, it's a beautiful ride. But it takes some getting used to. But once you learn how to ride that, it's a beautiful experience. And I say you have to have the courage. And of course, in your native languages, in Hindi, in Bengali, in Tamil, in the other languages of India, you have great writers who from your own experience are great because of their expression, because they have something great to say and they have a beautiful means of saying it.
Ma'am, when you direct Romeo and Juliet, how many changed you from main text?
Not much. What did we change, actually? we changed the location, I think. We set it in Mumbai. I think we set it in Mumbai. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in Fair Verona, where we set our scene. That's the chorus at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. So they were 2 households of 2 different castes. You know, then we get into the whole caste story. So not much to change, you know. Unfortunately, in this story, not much has changed over the centuries. There are still families that will not allow their daughter to marry a young man of a different caste. In America, you could say a different class. But somehow, of course, in Romeo and Juliet, love finds a way, but in the end, there's tragedy. And it's very interesting in the play we're doing right now, which is The Elephant Man. There's a wonderful scene in which the Elephant Man, the character of John Merrick, tells about his idea of Romeo and Juliet, but I don't want to give a spoiler, so you have to come and see our play in order to know. But Merrick has a wonderful take on the relationship of Romeo to Juliet. It's a very interesting scene in The Elephant Man. So the play we're working on right now is called The Elephant Man by Bernard Pomerantz. It's a wonderful story based on actually a true story of set in London of the 19th century. And I don't know how I'm going to do it as usual. I don't know how the set design will work. I have some vision of using the London skyline as a element in the design. But what else will happen, I have no idea. You know, it's evolving. You cannot know everything. As a director, rehearsal is a process of discovery in which you discover what the play is really about. And any director who says to you, I know exactly what I'm going to do, is lying to you. It's never true. You never know really what you're going to do until you start rehearsing. And then slowly, slowly, the play reveals itself to you and tells you what it needs. And so you have to listen to the play and come to it with an open mind, an open ear, what the play is asking you to do with it. If you come already knowing everything, there's no point in doing it. If you say to yourself, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I would like to find out, then that's a good place to start. And then you have to trust your actors, because your actors, your designers, your tech people, I love tech people. They're the greatest. They are your collaborators. And theater is a collaborative art. So as a director, you have to be humble enough to accept that you don't know everything. And if you can do that, then you will open yourself to the total experience. But it's not so easy, but it's absolutely necessary. Everybody know what I'm talking about? You're shaking your heads. I'd like to hear from you guys now. I've been talking a long time. I'm going to lose my voice.
So, ma'am, I have one last thing to ask you.
Yeah, please.
over the last 30 years, you have assembled a community of people from all parts of the world. So, we are in a time where there are disputes, communal disputes, and disputes between nations and communities. Where do you think theater stand, and how theater, or if I say art, theater art, can change this and can change people?
Yeah, that's always the question, no? On the one hand, you can get up on your soapbox and say, I know, theater can change the world. And on the other hand, you can say the theater experience is an experience of an hour and a half, 2 hours. For me, it's usually 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I never can manage to do a short play. It's hopeless. My partner is always complaining about this. I don't know why that happens, but anyway, I want to be humble enough to say that as an artist, I hope that I have touched people with the story that I want to tell. I tell a particular story because I think it can make a difference. I hope that people go away thinking about the story they have been a part of. I hope my audience has felt that it was a collaboration between the artists and the audience. In the greatest moments of theater, the artist and the audience become one. And so there is an exchange of energy. I have had that experience, not always, but often enough that I look forward to it with every play that we do. So this collaboration between the audience and the theater group means that you have touched the heart, opened the mind of your theater group, and the audience has heard and responded. And in that response, you hope that they take away something from you that they can carry with them. I don't know how long. It's like being in front of a great work of art. I mean, does Mona Lisa change you? Does Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, does it change you? Does, thank you, Jocelyn. Yeah, you know this as a musician. You're not alone up there. You can't hope to play music and sing music as if you're by yourself. So the same thing with theater. The final product of a theatrical performance is the collaboration between you and the audience. And in the end, everybody is changed. Everybody, that's what's so addictive. As a theater person, you become addictive to that moment of heightened awareness that you play. When things are really going well, you feel that you and the audience are one. And it's that moment that you live for on stage and that you want. It's like an addict, you need to go and have it again and again and again. And I think for the audience, I think it's the same thing. The audience comes in order to be in an experience of heightened awareness that changes them, I hope.
I don't have any other questions. So Deep, if you have any questions,
Good,
you
thank
can.
you. Because my voice is going.
Yes, I can
I'd like,
understand, ma'am. It's been almost 1.5 hours. I can understand.
yeah. And I'd like to see some of my friends. Jazzy is out there, and Santano is out there, and many people who I've just met as Facebook friends. So can I see some of these people? Asleen, are these people going to come live, or I'm just going to see the chat? Hi, Bala. I don't know you, Bala, but thank you so much. Let's communicate more outside of this platform. For those of you who have actually tuned in and stayed, of course, I would love to be able to speak to you further. So please visit me on Facebook. You will find my WhatsApp number on my Facebook page. And Balasaravanan Tiruvambalam. You're obviously probably Tamil. Are you a director, theater director, and actor? Because Bala Saravanan says, great talk, thanks. So I would like to know who some of these people are. Is that possible?
Yeah, Deep is managing that end, and we will come up with something.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Antanu. Yeah, you and I have something else, some more stuff to do together. And your friend is here. Oh, you're a lighting designer. Okay, I got sort of, from your comment, I got a vibe of director or designer. So let's talk outside of this platform, because I'm always looking for a good lighting designer. So please get in touch with me. Where are you located, Bala? Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Magic Lantern very well. With KK is the director, no? Krishna Kumar.
This was the question we skipped, which came.
Let's see, comments. Okay. Vinny, nice to see you. Vinny Nandini is here. Swapan, hi Swapan. And Viswarup. Gaurav, yes. If you love UNESCO, let's talk about it. Gaurav, if you're still online, are you a director? I see the chats, but I don't guess. Are we going to see faces or not? Maybe not. I know it's difficult. This internet is not easy to manipulate. I'm just looking at some of the chats. Oh, okay. So it's not possible on Facebook Live sessions. Okay. No problem. Abisha, nice to see you. Subhajit, nice to see you also. Yeah, Gaurav Das again. We can talk some more about the UNESCO. And Zahir, of course, from Bangladesh. So nice to see so many people coming online. Jasleen is saying you can see people only on Zoom or Instagram. Okay, no problem. Hopefully this won't be the last time I meet so many theater people. So it's the beginning of something. Some collaboration will come out. So please, Bala, you can get in touch with me. Jasleen, anyway, we're speaking week by week. Santano, love you too, man. And Subhajit, Arnav. Sorry I could not answer more of your question, Arnav, but maybe you can teach me something about the diasporic influence in theater. I would love to learn more about that. Let's see. Yeah, cool. Are we about done?
I am, because I am from Kolkata, very soft corner of Rabindranath Tagore. You direct Sacrifice. Please tell about Sacrifice. It's.
I have already spoken about it, Deep. I don't think I have to repeat it, do I?
Tagore Sacrifice. You have directed? Yeah, I have read yesterday. You have directed Tagore Sacrifice in Orwell.
Yeah, but I've already spoken about it. Subhankar and I have already spoken about it as a topic.
She has mentioned it. She has mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Godot, and then I came to Sacrifice, and then we moved to Shakespeare.
Yeah, I've already covered it deep. So
no, I want to say that what is the main in your vision? What is the main conflict of Sacrifice in your vision?
I've already done this, man. I don't want to go back and do it again. And okay, I would like to have dinner. So yes. So maybe we can end this session. And you can hear the video. I hope you guys have recorded this.
Yes, yes, we will publish it in YouTube as well.
Okay, cool. So Deep, you can hear my response about Sacrifice. I spent quite a bit of time talking about it. I don't want to go over it again. And I understand your enthusiasm for Tagore, but I think I've already told the audience about this. So
maybe, ma'am, next time we can come up with different subjects regarding theater, and you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, if your audience is not too bored with listening to me a second time, I'm available.
I don't think so.
It's not right.
Okay, but an hour and a half is like my limit.
We will meet again and next session with practical acting class.
Oh my
we will
God.
meet again. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Next session in practical class in acting.
I'll be waiting for that.
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
that's a good topic. That's a good topic. And thank you, Jazzy, for tuning in. And everybody, please listen to Jocelyn Orlick on whatever platform she chooses to play on. Her music is delightful. And if you Google her and go on her Facebook page, you will hear a wonderful, wonderful musician and a great, great human being and a sensitive artist. So Jocelyn Orlick, love you too, babe. So can I say goodbye?
Yes, ma'am. Good night. Good night. We will meet again.
Okay, so thank you.
Vanakkam, ma'am.
Vanakkam. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
তাহলে আজকের মতোই শেষ হচ্ছে আমাদের অনলাইন থিয়েটার টিউটোরিয়াল। আবার আমাদের পরবর্তী সেশন 2 জুলাই বৃহস্পতিবার সন্ধ্যে 7টায়। সঙ্গে থাকুন আমাদের।